Thank you for being with us in such an important moment for all of us. I would like to thank Aapresid as well. In beginning our lecture, we will be talking about the new strategy for the comprehensive management of corn Chicharrita. I will take a few minutes to talk about what happened in the last two campaigns, where we had different things between campaigns 22 and 23. We had different climate changes, Niño and Niña, and the planted area in both seasons was record. The unharvested surface was also record, 17 and 18%, and production was truly very low. As can be seen in 22-23, the protagonist was La Niña. In the last year, the one to bring a paradigm shift was Chicharrita, and you will see the similarity of the damage that this bug can cause. It is similar or equal to one of the biggest droughts that we have suffered before, that we suffered in the last season. These last two seasons, corn was in peril. Production shrinkages over 100%. In other areas it was a little less, but the problem was all over the place. It caused millionaire losses, and there is a direct or indirect impact on the value chain. I would like to also mention the anguish and the concern of farmers. Many of you are farmers, they are advisors, they are agricultural engineers. You are part of the industry chain, you are distributors, and I'd like to take 2 minutes. I'm sorry, but I was the one videotaping. The one there is my father. My father is 70 years old now. He was born and raised until he was 12 in the countryside. My family is made up of farmers. We are in the north of Santa Fe, near San Justo. We were really beaten up by this problem, and we took a walk on the lots. This is a corn lot, and my father was very concerned with this. And I go back to the truck, and I can't find him. And I look through the window, and he was there with his water bottle that has blessed holy water. He's a very Christian person. He's a firm believer. And what I see there was how deeply anguished he was. And I believe that many of you can relate to how sorry or how despaired you felt when you were in front of a lot without knowing what to do. This makes me think how good it would have been, or how good it would be, to have a product, a formulation, or holy water for that matter, that will help us manage the problem of corn Chicharrita. And this is why we have come here to talk about Verdavis, the key piece for the comprehensive management of Chicharrita, a single, unique molecule in the market with over 20 years development, with higher quality standards, as is the case with Syngenta, and a strong vector control, not just in the country, but also in neighboring countries, such as Paraguay and Brazil, that have been dealing with this problem for over 3 years. And here I'd like to leave you with a phrase, but beyond the phrase, there is no such thing as a magic formula if someone does not run it correctly. But in Aapresid, we are all connected. We all have to be responsible for management. There is no formula here, but a way about it, and we all have to be responsible of how to carry it forward. So today, together with Lucas, you are all invited to get to know far more about the benefits of Verdavis, so that in the next season you can have healthy crops and healthy production, as we all wish for Argentina and for Argentina's farm. Thank you so much.
Estamos a la vanguardia de la innovación.
At Syngenta, we've always been at the avant-garde of innovation for your harvest to reach the maximum potential, for you to seed corn, knowing that it will have a good yield. We will be there to protect you from the new intruder that appeared to affect your corn chicharrita. So here we are for you, because we know you want the maximum potential. This is why an innovative product came along to protect your crops from chicharrita, your corn crops. We are, and we've been, and we will continue to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Verdabis, the key piece to control, comprehensively control chicharrita. Come forward, my friend. Good afternoon to you all. How about sound? I'm Lucas Ratto. I work with Syngenta for a couple of years now. I am the technical responsible person of development, especially insecticides. And in this opportunity, I have come here to talk about what Verdabis is all about. This being a product that has been used in other countries where this chicharrita has been mischieving or behaving in its own kind of mischievous way. But it also gives a certainty of the fact that we have a tool available that has already been developed and proven in several points in Brazil and in Paraguay. So without any further ado, I will start talking about a few aspects that relate to how plinazolin works, how it is made up and how it works. Plinazolin, or Verdabis, consists of two APIs. Plinazolin, the one you all know because it is the component of Virantra. You may have used it. It's the last launcher, the one before the last. It's given us very good results. And in this case, it is combined or synergized with a pyrethroid such as lambda-sialotrine to create Verdabis. These are two different mechanisms of action. It comes without a ready mix. As Omar said, advantages on a ready mix by a company such as Syngenta in connection to quality and use, safety, and some Verdabis characteristics that have to do with what I will be underscoring here. There are several aspects that are brought together by this molecule. Plinazolin is strongly bound to the waxy layer of the leaf surface. This is one of the key features. It gives it excellent stability, low volatility, and tolerance to rainfall. And persistency comes along hand in hand with this. A great deal of the product's persistency is given by these characteristics. And this was seen especially in soybean crops. The modus operandi in connection to a pest or a bug has to do with contact with ingesting the product. It's a new mode of action, as I said. And finally, an important aspect that we've seen both in bugs, in bed bugs, and here in this chicharrita is that it modifies or upsets the feeding habit of bugs. It's a very important point when it comes to differentiating the control of a pest to the control of a vector. A point that we learned and that we continue to learn in whatever relates with contact with crops. Characteristics of the formulation, as I was mentioning, the advantage of a ready mix, the product is ready to be used, combination between concentrated solution and concentrated soluble product, homogeneous distribution of particles in the product's broth. This gives us safety, and it has to do with the product's efficacy. Verdabis, from our point of view, is supported on 3 pillars, as we call them. The first one has to do with the knockout power. A lot is what we take a look at. A lot of this is the measure of an insecticide. We want the product to knock out, to control for a prolonged time. The second aspect relates to how linazoline modifies the feeding habits insects have. And finally, the last point that is relating to persistency. The two ends of this, knockout power and persistency, is whatever everybody looks for when selecting an insecticide or a pesticide. If we bring down into further details in knockout power, I'll give you some information to exemplify what the knockdown is, or the speed the product has to control, and also breaking the insect cycle, how we affect the different stages, the control of larvae and adults. In order for us to come down to examples, we will get to see tests. On the left, you see on the one hand a test under artificial conditions, under controlled conditions. We separate a group of adults, and on the right side you see the same, but this is in a group of larvae. And we measured control efficacy or control percentage at 5 different points, 5 minutes to 6 hours. Verdabis, blue, and competing brands in gray. For adults, you will see that at 3 hours we manage almost 90% of control and 100% at 6 hours. We soon find a very good control standard in connection to knockdown, and competing products, for several reasons I cannot mention it, even though it escalated efficacy over time, it never reached Verdabis standards. If we go to to larvae, these are controlled conditions, and we cannot say but the fact that this is the percentage of control that is achieved. For larvae, when it comes to the product having been applied, this was done topically. It was applied directly on the bugs. And in larvae, when the product is applied, almost 90% of the population was under control, reaching 100% at 6 hours. And the competing product, even though efficacy improved, it never reached the performance of Verdabis, not in terms of control percentages or in time. The very same data can be seen differently. The very same aspect can be seen differently. It relates to the following. You've seen that in corn lots of last season, additionally to the symptoms that were seen with effects, we saw fumigene presence as a result of the effect of this on leaves. In seeing the insecticide effect, well, we measure the presence of those sugary secretions that are generated by insects. On the left, we see the control. On the right, 7 applications by the competing brand. We see there is a clear control. There is improvement in those ejections, but where we compare it with Verdabis, we clearly see those differences. We do see improvement, not just in connection to the test or to the control, but in connection to the competitor. You may be thinking that in Verdabis circle, even there are ejections. So this means that we continue to have the problem, and I reserved this slide to touch upon this issue. None of the control programs that we apply on our crops will manage a full control. There will always be presence of Dalbolus on the lots, no matter whether they apply Verdabis or any other product that competes. And this is a very important point to highlight and to understand, that what we look for when we control or attempt to control a vector, it is not to achieve high efficacy as we do look for in a pest, but rather to protect the crop in the most sensitive periods to avoid diseases generated by Dalbolus to generate greater impact on the crop's yield. This is a very important point, and for those people that will be growing corn and that will be applying insecticides this year, please take this into consideration, because you will have Dalbolus after the number of applications you need to keep Dalbolus under check. We hope that this will not happen, but if it so happens, you should know that this will happen in this way. We will develop this towards the end of the presentation, because another pillar comes to play, and this is why we talk about integrated management. It's one point in our favor. It's one more key we have in our toolkit to manage this problem that, as you all know, cannot be done very easily. I also talked about the breaking of the cycle of pests with excellent controls, not just adults but nymphs or larvae. This is under control points, measurement points where 10 days for Verdabis. We manage controls of nymphs and adults. We managed 100% of the population at stake, and the competitive brand, the one that you saw on previous slides, even though performance improved, we never managed to get the performance that Verdabis has. If we move on to the point of cease of feeding, I would rather talk about an alteration of the eating habits, and people in Brazil resorted to quite a curious methodology. What they've done was to take a known population of Dalbolus, and they fixed on the body of each one of those electrodes, and they measured the activity of these during a time period. It may sound crazy, but this is done. It was done in a very well-known university in Brazil. The paper is available to anyone that would like to take a look at it, if you want to get into the details of it, because it truly is very interesting. What they tried to do was to measure how, when applying insecticide, they would modify the feeding habits. Parameters that they measured were how did the insect take to prick after the insecticide was applied, how many times did the insect prick during a time, and how would that salivation transfer last over time. So these parameters were improved, all of them were improved after applying Verdabis. So Verdabis was applied and it was compared against a competitor. And Dalbolus took longer to start pricking on corn. When it started pricking on corn, it did so in a time period, less times than a control or a competing product. And additionally to that, it did so during a shorter period of time. And this is related to the difference between controlling a pest and controlling a vector. What we are aiming at here is not to control Dalbolus, but to rather avoid, based on the way possible, or stop Dalbolus from transmitting this stunting complex. And, well, the pricking time, the number of pricks, and the lasting or the duration of pricks were favorably altered for Verdavis.
Siguiente punto.
The next pillar for summarizing and finishing on the attributes of Verdavis has to do with persistence. Much of that persistence, or all of it, actually has to do with clinasterine, and it has to do with, as I told you before, the adherence in wax, the low volatility, how the product has tolerance to rainfalls, everything you know about the Philandra urticarium products. It's important for you to know that 98%, almost all of the product is stuck on the surface of the leaf. 2% of that product reaches the other side of the leaf, and that small percentage is what gives us the control of Atripsy and Reniola in the case of soybeans. In the case of corn, it allows us to reach the other side of the leaf, to have a control of the nymphs, and we have a bigger advantage there. As you know, the Dalbolus puts the eggs on new leaves, and the new leaves in the corn is erect, and therefore there's another part that is evident from this, and has to do with the quality of the application. It's essential that when you do an insecticide control for Dalbolus, we have a very good quality of the application.
Pero hoy Omar estuvo comentando.
Today, Omar was mentioning that we're speaking of a comprehensive management. Actually, the presentation refers to comprehensive management, and again, I'm sure you've heard this many times from the specialists that speak of Dalbolus, how to manage it. We've also analyzed this in other countries. Our recommendation is not far from that. We speak of 3 pillars again for Dalbolus management. The first pillar has to do with a genetic tolerance. And here I go back to what we mentioned before. There's always a percentage of the population that will be small, but will be highly likely to contain the diseases we want to prevent. 10% of the population that survives our control, if it's infected and if it transmits the diseases we want to prevent, that will already generate a high impact in the yield, because their ability to migrate to other places is very high, as I'm sure you've heard in all the talks throughout this year about the characteristics of Dalbolus. So again, the difference between the pest control and vector control. That's why it's so important to pay attention to the genetics. The second aspect is the cultural management. I think this year has helped us a lot, but it has to do with avoiding green points and gradual sowing. I'm sure you may be surprised here, because finally we planted corn in many areas when the weather allows us to do so, when the rainfall allows. So to the extent possible, bear this in mind. Based on my personal experience, we know the consequences of a gradual planting, but you know that you plant the corn when the conditions are favorable. Also, the constant control of the corn, nutritional management of the crop. We've seen that there are some crops that are better nurtured from the health aspect. They tolerate these diseases better that are transmitted by Dalbolus. And finally, the monitoring of the vector. Consider how strongly it's present in the area, how it's evolving. I'm sure all the things you've heard throughout the talks today about this insect. And the final pillar, this is where Syngenta is involved with its portfolio. That's a chemical management. That is the products available. And one has to do with the treatment of the seeds. Syngenta, with Verdavis, launched an alternative for seeds treatment that is called Fortensa. It's available in the market, so it can be selected and included in your portfolio. The second item there refers to the correct foliar application of the insecticide. This has to do with the recommendations and mentioned the positioning of the product. Again, at what stage in the crop we have to apply our insecticides. Remember that there's a susceptible period in the crop. It's more sensitive to these diseases. The rotation of the modes of action and the use of products with more than one mode of action. These are tools that are very important to prevent some kind of resistance, as I'm sure there's a paper from some country that is starting to have some issues about this. The timing and the quality of the application, well, these are all aspects that we all should bear in mind when it comes to having this chemical management pillar. None of these three pillars works well on their own. These three pillars need to be constantly considered when it comes to managing Dalbolus. And I repeat, each of these, even if they have a tolerant genetics, they will require paying attention, making controls, doing it in the right time, having a control and a management so that you can avoid the gradual planting. And these pillars interact among them, and that's how they have to be managed. And now going into the positioning or recommendation for the use of the product, we will be recommending Verdavis considering the first pillar, the tolerant genetics or good behavior. And the positioning of the product has to do with starting the applications as from V2, that is in the stages of higher susceptibility to Dalbolus or to the stunt complex. So as from V2, the first application, we detect the first individuals in the land and we apply. There are no thresholds so far. We have discussed this a lot with people from Brazil and Paraguay. The best recommendation from them was that apply, if you see Dalbolus in the land, apply it. Do not wait to see the Dalbolus on the leaves, because if you do, probably you will have a big issue. Actually, it happened to us in the past season. It's not one Verdavis application, it's two applications, and two successive applications of the product with a distance of 5 to 7 days between them. As you know, in 1 week, the corn can have up to 2 new leaves. So it's very important to have these different strata protected. So far 2 applications, because we're working to have a third application in the recommendation. Both in Brazil and in Paraguay, they already have 3 applications. So for the time being, 2 applications is what we recommend, but you should know that we are working on the third one. Now, what happens if Dalbolus starts to appear? What happens if it starts to make some noise there? Well, the idea is to use any of the products that's registered from the competitors with different modes of action to maintain Dalbolus under control and start the control program with Verdavis. If it happens after the 2 applications of V2, that is 2 successive applications of V2, and we keep seeing Dalbolus, our recommendation again is to choose different modes of action and continue with the application schedules with different modes of action with products that are registered for this corn leafhopper control. These are recommendations. This is not going to be the case all over the country, but as I said, The tolerant genetics here is key. There will be situations where with 2 applications we will be fine. There will be situations where we will need no applications. In other situations, we will need 4 applications of the insecticide. And I think the most important thing here, from my perspective for you, is that we have to be paying attention to the land. We have to walk through the lot of land much more. And we have to pay a lot of attention to starting the controls if we have Dalbolus in our land. But from these early stages, everything that happens here is key. It's essential. Now, if we do everything correctly here and Dalbolus keeps being present and we just abandon the crop, then we will start all over again. So this is what I wanted to share with you about the product. I think I'm not forgetting anything. I hope we have a more benevolent season, but I always like to see the bright side of things. I think that we already have a lot of tools, not just chemical, but also knowledge. We are more attentive. I think this season we will not be as surprised as in the past season. I don't know if Dalbolus will be there or not. Nobody knows, or very few people dare make that step. But if it appears, I think we've already made a lot of progress. We still have a lot to learn in Argentina, but we have learned a lot already. We've learned from our own experience, we've learned from the experience in neighboring countries, and we already have a lot of tools to face this insect that is causing so many headaches, not only in this season, but I think in this moment. So that's all from me by now. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, I will be here available. Thank you. That was very clear.
Sí. Hay un montón de preguntas, gracias por
There are lots of questions. Thank you for the questions. We're going to try and answer as many as possible. There's a first question here. It says that you mentioned glufocloceran. What's the benefit of Verdavis?
Hola, hola. No lo mencioné, pero
I didn't mention it, but it's a good question. Verdavis, on the one hand, modifies the feeding habits of Dalbolus. Karate provides that rapid control effect, and it also has a synergy effect with prinazoline, because what it does is to generate some irritability in the insect. It's more mobile on the leaf, and it's more probable for it to be in contact with the clinazorin. This is patented at Syngenta, this synergy with clinazoline. It's documented and it's patented, and that's why it's a combination of these principles. So if you're thinking of using Vidantra just for Dalbolus control, well, you should know that it leaves a lot outside, over 20% in control efficacy. Thank you, Lucas. There's another question that you're recommending 2 applications. So the question is, those applications can be split or divided with some other product in between, or should they be consecutive applications? We've seen lots of cases where everything you put in between the Verdavis applications destroys what you've built. We've tried 2 applications in a row, with one in the middle with pyrotrophs and nicotinoids. We've tried the mixture in V2 and starting with 2 or 3 Verdavis applications afterwards, and everything goes back to 0. That's key. The 2 or 3 applications of Verdavis, because, well, we're working on the 3rd, they should be consecutive in it's 5-7 days in between, and it has to do with the rates. If we make the first application on day 1, on day 7, if there's a rainfall forecast, we should do it on the 5th day, because if we wait until the 10th day, it's an issue. We know this is complex for farmers. We know it's difficult and it requires whole logistics behind, but these are variables that we have to start taking into account. We have to start planning for it when it comes to planting corn in this season. The logistics of the applications is very delicate, and the provision of the product is another issue. I was laughing because when we started with the development of clinazolin, or of Verdavis actually, I started thinking that the planning for the purchase of these products should come with the pre-merchant, that is the corn pre-merchant insecticide. I think that's key, and the same for the logistics in the applications. Again, I think it was a long answer. Thank you. I invite you to take a seat because there are many questions. So I was told to take a seat. It's an order. There's a question whether it will be available for this season. Yeah, we have the good news that it will be available. The product is available already for sale. So I'm sure the commercial teams can already start sharing with you the availability of the products. It will be available as from August. We know that in some areas it has started to rain already, particularly in Entre Rios, Santa Fe, or areas where they have a dairy production. So the idea is to help and prioritize those areas that will first start with the crops. So we hope there will be a high demand, and since this is the first year, we have a very high volume. There's one for you. You mentioned the 3 pillars, and here the question is whether the level of importance of the 3 pillars is the same, or how would you classify them in a ranking? I think you mentioned something. Yeah, for me, they are the same level. It's essential to make this a comprehensive and integrated management. It's difficult to prioritize one or the other. It was presented as 1, 2, and 3, but I think that if you remove any of them, that will have an impact on the 2 others. So I don't like losing, so I would leave the 3 of them. And they are not mutually exclusive, so taking one out doesn't have a benefit on the others. So no, I would consider the 3 of them. Yeah, I compare this to the legs in a 3-leg table. If you remove one, it will fall. And then there's a question, I think you answered this already, but it appeared after the presentation. With what type of product or modes of action is it recommended to use in the Verdavis strategy? Looking at the experience in neighboring countries, the products that are being used are the mixtures of epidendroids and neonicotinoids. Any of the products that are registered already today can be a very good tool to supplement the alternative of Verdavis, both before and after. We are convinced and we are very satisfied with our product, and I think that's where it makes a difference. So our recommendation is to stop again, and I will repeat this. Start with the first 2 applications as from V2, and before or after any of the products that are recommended and registered may be a good option to supplement this control schedule. And we have to start speaking of controlled schedules in Argentina for corn, because so far it hasn't been the case. There's another one for you. What happens with clinazolin in the stubble. Going back to the stubble aspect, I asked for that information to Global. I would have loved to share with you right now that it is there. The ASIC's work is under study. Particularly Brazil and Paraguay are more interested than us. They have a big problem with changes, and the fact that Venezuelan stays in the stubble would be a differential advantage because the main damage is in the emergence. So far I cannot answer that. And then about herbicide control, what we have mapped is that the control is done in the first stages, in the larvae or the nymph. And we do not control the egg of the valvulus. It's embedded in the leaf. But as soon as the valvulus nymph emerge, they are controlled by the product. That is what I try to show with the, I don't remember how I showed it, the interruption in the life cycle of the insect. I showed some data of the high-level controls and very quickly in time. We have 10 minutes. What's the biggest differential of this product compared to the mixtures of pyrethroids and neocotyledons? Well, we've seen this. It was on the screen, not just the control percentage, but also the persistence. What I was showing today about the modifications in the growth habits, it was with this mix. There are several advantages there. And actually, when I was telling you what happened when we interrupted the successive applications of Ardavis, that application was a mixture of pyrethroids, pyrethroids and non-nicotinoids. That destroyed it all, and so that is a clear comparison with our alternative Ardavis. There are two similar questions. Now I will combine them. Basically, the question is about early crops in the areas we just mentioned. That is late August, early September, where we have a lower temperature and a lower rate of corn development. If the first application is done in V2, that rule of the 5-7 days, is it better perhaps to wait a little more to see the phenology, or we should go to these 5-7 days as we are recommending? Good question. Let's hope that in the early crops, I'm sure that you're speaking of Entre Rios in August, if we have valvulus pressure there in August or early September, we would be in trouble. But if that happens, I hope it doesn't. If you want to start counting the leaves that are shown per week, you can do it. The most important thing here, I think, is that the leaves that expand should be protected. If they are not, they should be there for as little time as possible. That is the recommendation. The period of 5 to 7 days has to do, it's a generality. In those situations, perhaps we should go to the 5 days, and always looking at the weather forecast. If we move to 15 because it's raining and we don't have the conditions, we are in trouble. And related to that, related to the forecast, the weather forecast, if I don't apply it on time, what are the risks? Maybe because of weather reasons or because the sprayer is not there. I think it's a product for the farmer to use, not the distributor. I think it should be on site, not in the distributor's warehouse. You will be planting the corn. If we speak of late planting, you will be planting in November, December, or even January further north. The corn in 5 days will be out, and in 5 more days you will have V2. So if you're going to plant corn, as I said, I invite you to try it and to have it ready in your warehouse and not wait for the distributor I agree. Yes, that's what I meant. It's maize, the core, the pre-emergent, and the insecticide, everything together in the same purchase.
A ver si acá las chicas de Aapresid nos pueden dar una mano con el celular.
No, ahí está.
¿Está?
Ahí está. No, perdón. Había una con respecto a Engeo. ¿Está registrado?
In here, is it registered? Can it be used? It's not registered so far. We are not planning to do it. I think Verdavis is the best tool. Perhaps it will be in the future, but for the time being, I think we have a lot to do with Verdavis.
No, son preguntas repetidas, así que no habría más.
Well, apparently, there are no further questions. I can add something. If somebody wants to know about the recommendation in Brazil and Paraguay, the dose there is 200 cubic centimeters here in Argentina. In Brazil and Paraguay, they are at 250. We discussed here whether we should go to 200 or 250. With 200 cubic centimeters from Dalbos control, we are fine. 250 is more for the bug control. As I mentioned, they have a serious problem with the bugs there. Fortunately, we are not aware of that. And basically, it's good for you to know that that difference has to do with the bug pressure, the pest pressure they have, and with the spectrum.
Si está...
How about traps today? Do you count them? And are we testing with biologics? What is the recommendation we have in connection to the mixture and the use of biologics in the comprehensive management? In Argentina, we are mapping whether we can incorporate some application of biologics, not together with Verdavis, but after or prior. In Brazil, this is being done. And in connection to traps, in the morning, I got this message. It is kind of variable. In the north of the country, it is pretty complicated. We still have some more time to go, but if we discuss with those that are undertaking this, that are implementing these traps, the recommendation that they've given, or that I heard from them, is that they won't be useful to make a recommendation in my lot. It is a mapping of how the population evolves or changes over time. It is a mapping that will last for a series of years, and it will contribute a lot of knowledge of how this is like in Argentina, what happens in winter, what are the most probable areas that have this problem. It aims at having some clarity on the insect than on the daily management. This is publicly known. There's a lot of information, and those that did not receive it and who want to receive it can approach our stand, our booth. We can give you links. So this is public information so that everybody can have it and everybody can use it in order to make a rational use of it. Thank you again. Thank you for being here, and we